Well, hello there, my little mathematicians. Today we are going to explore a little bit more about how to create a dot plot. If you could follow along on page 17 of your packet, it looks like this. Normally, they will either have you do what's called a survey where you'd collect data, and then from there you'd create a dot plot, or they'd either give you a frequency table. This is a frequency table. And then from there you'd create a dot plot. So for the sake of time, let's pretend that we interviewed our classmates and we asked them on average about how many hours per night do you get of sleep? And then these were the answers that we got. So in the frequency chart, these little tally marks stand for how many times this happened, meaning this many people answered that they get 6 hours of sleep on average per night. And then this many people average 6.5 hours of sleep per night. Okay, and then when we do tally marks, whenever you come to the fifth number, draw a line diagonally across, because then it just makes it easier to count. Otherwise, like, you're counting all the individual ones. And so you go 1, 2, 3, 4, and then once you get to the fifth one, you do a sideways diagonal one. All right, just a side note. Okay, so for this one, we have 5 people that sleep 6 hours on average. Another 5 answered that they get 6.5 hours of sleep. Nobody said they get 7. 3 people said 7.5. 4 said 8. 4 said 8.5. And then 7 people said that they average 9 hours per night. Okay, so that's the first thing, is to kind of all the tally marks quantify in numbers how many times it happened. That's known as the frequency. How many times did you get that particular answer? Then from there, you want to make your dot plot. And so the first thing you do is you do a number line. And when you do your number line, you can choose whichever ones you want. You just have to be consistent. So if I start counting by ones, you have to continue counting by ones. Or if you count by 2s or 3s or 4s or 5s, whatever you choose to count by for your specific data set, just remain consistent. And then you don't always have to start at 1. You can kind of start, I like to start like one number smaller than what this is, and then go one number bigger. So my first data value is 6 and it only goes to 9, so I don't need to count by 2s or 5s. It's best to just count by 1s. And then I'm going to go all the way until I get one number higher than where I end, so I'm going to end at 10. And then what you do is you draw dots above each value to represent how many times you got each specific answer. So for 6, it happened 5 times, so I'm going to draw 5 dots above 6. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and that's it. When you draw your dots, you want to be careful and kind of do them evenly spaced and kind of do them the same size. And when you do your next set, so here's 5, you want to kind of make sure that they're, oops, it's for 6.5, so it shouldn't be at the 7, it should be between the 6 and a 7. So right here, between the 6 and 7, I'm going to do 5 dots, because that's representing 6.5 represented 5 times. And notice that I keep my dots in line with each other, so I can quickly look at it and see, oh, well, 6 and 6.5 both happen the same amount of times, because this one doesn't have a higher peak than this one. They both are exactly even, so they happen the same number of times. And then for number 7, it didn't happen at all, so I shouldn't have any dots above the 7. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my whiteout and white that little guy out right there. For 7.5, though, it happened 3 times, so still stay in line. There's your first dot, second dot, and third dot. So then at a quick glance, you can kind of see, oh, hey, 6.5 and 6 happened 2 more times than this one did. And then for 8, it happened 4 times. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then for 8.5, so between the 8 and 9, it also happened 4 times. And again, note that they're in line with each other. And then finally, my last one at 9, it happened 7 times. So there's 5 right here. And then we want 2 more than that. So it's going to go 2 higher than my highest peak that happened earlier. Okay. All right. And then that's all it is for a dot plot. You're just drawing the frequency of how many times you got each specific data value. And when you draw your number line, be consistent. If you count by ones the whole time. Don't go 5, 6, 7, then 10, then 12, and 14. Like if you count by ones, you need to count by ones the whole time. And that's all there is to it. Then they might ask us some questions about it. Okay, how many hours was the most often? Well, look at your peak. And right here, this is the highest, so it's 9. 9 hours was the most common answer. I mean, the only trap is that some people might say, oh, it happened 7 times, so 7. No, 7 is how many times it happened, but it's the number 9 that actually happened 7 times. Other than that, that's the biggest quote-unquote trap that would happen for this. Okay, the thing that happened the least, look at your smallest peak, that's right here at 7.5 hours, or 7.5 hours. But technically, is that really true? Actually, no, because we were asked all of these data values and 7 was part of the data set. And how many times did it happen? 0 times. So that's why it's like, sometimes you want to actually look at the frequency table rather than the chart. If you just look at the chart, you might be like, oh, hey, yeah, right here, this is the smallest one. But don't forget, this is a data set value that was asked as well, and it doesn't have any dots because nobody answered that value. So in reality, it's not 7.5 hours that happened the least, it's actually 7 hours. Are there any outliers? So outliers are numbers that are like way smaller than all the rest. So if everyone was between 6 to 9, and then there's one guy that's like, I only sleep 1 hour per night, I don't need sleep. And then somebody else is like, oh, I go to bed at like 6 o'clock every night, I get 14 hours of sleep. Okay, they're outliers. They're either way bigger than everyone else or way smaller than everyone else. That's what an outlier is. Were there any outliers in here? No, they're all kind of fairly close together. How many students were surveyed? So how many people answered? Count it up. You had 10, 13, and 13 plus 4 is 17. 17 plus 4 is 21. 21 plus 7 is 28 students. How many students slept longer than 7 hours? So here's 7, so then count the numbers after. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. So 18 students. Now I could have counted it from the dot plot like I did, or I could have gone right here. Okay, more than 7. So that would be here down, and I could have added the frequency amounts. Also, something to keep in mind. Let's pretend that there was 7. 2 people said that they slept 7 hours. If they said more than 7, I wouldn't count those 2. But if they said 7 or more hours, then I would include the 2 people and all the rest. Okay, so if they slept 7 or more hours, you include the 7 and everyone else, versus if they say just more than 7 hours, then it's only the people more than 7, and you wouldn't include the people who actually slept 7. Okay, so those are just some of the trickier questions that they could ask. Finally, on this page, how many students slept 6.5, 7.5, or 8.5? Well, how many people slept 6.5? 5 people. 7.5 was 3. And 8.5 was 4. So go ahead and add all those together, and you get 12 students. All right, let's go ahead and turn the page to page 18 in our packet. Okay, for page 18 in our packet, this time they gave us a frequency table, and notice that they did the tally marks the same way, and then they just counted, they actually told us the frequency of how many times each one happened. Now they want us to draw a dot plot. So look at the numbers that it's giving me. I'm going to go ahead and start with 2, and they counted by 1/4. So you have 2, 2 1/4, 2 2/4, which 2/4 reduces to 1/2. So you have 1/4, 2/4, 3/4, and then 4/4 is 1, so 1 plus 2 is 3, and then 3 1/4. Okay, so I counted by 1/4 because that's what they did in my frequency table. And notice that it's actually perfect. It goes from 2 to 3 1/4. just like my frequency table. For 2, it happened twice, so do 2 dots above the 2. 2 1/4 happened 3 times, so 3 dots, keep them in line with each other. Hopefully yours are better than mine, but I'm doing it around the camera. Okay, 2 3/4, so skip the 1/2, go to the 2 3/4, and keep it in line with your other one. 3 happened 4 times, so make sure that the 3 is in line with each other, and then it's 1 higher than that. And 3 1/4 is only once. There you go, there's your dot plot. Now let's answer the questions that they ask us. Remember, you can always pause the video anytime, try to answer the questions yourself, and then unpause it and check yourself. Okay, it says, how many students have heights greater than 2 3/4? Notice how it doesn't say 2 3/4 or more. So if it said 2 3/4 and more than that, I'd include the 2 3/4 and the 3 3/4. But it just says only the ones greater than that. So I'm not going to include these. I'm only going to count the 3 and the 3 1/4. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So 5 students. What height is the least students? So the least amount of students was right here, the one of 0, which was 2 1/2 feet. The most, we'll just look at your little peak right here, and that was here at 3 feet. And by the way, another way to say feet, if you ever see that, 1 little dash stands for feet, and 2 little dashes stand for inches. Just a side note. Math is all about abbreviating things. Shh, don't tell English people. All right, how many students are 2 1/4 feet? Well, 1, 2, 3. And 2 3/4 feet. 1, 2, 3 again. Then are 3 feet. 3 feet was 1, 2, 3, 4. So this and this, so add that together, you get 6 than this amount. So I'm going to subtract that amount. So what's 6 minus 4? 2. The next question says, how many students are in Miss Meadows' class? In other words, they interviewed everyone in the class, so how many people got interviewed? Well, look at your little frequency chart. You have 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So 13 students answered the survey, which means that's how many students were in the class. What was the difference between the greatest students and the least students? Well, the greatest amount that answered was 4. And the smallest amount that answered was 1. So we'd say 3 students. Although technically, I don't really like that answer because I would even say, well, 2 1/2 should be part of the data set and 0 people answered that. So you could say 4 minus 0 equals 4. So you could have an answer of 4 students. If this were me as a teacher, I would accept either answer because it's poorly written. Because if you do it on here and you count consistently, 2 1/2 is part of the data set and 0 people answered that. But the frequency chart, if you use this, you would get confused and put 4 and 1 and then get 3. So I personally would accept either answer. And if it was multiple choice, I wouldn't have both of them as a possibility. All right. Finally, our last page to review dot plots. Go ahead and turn in your packet to page 19. A dot plot represents data using dots across a number line. Each dot has a value of 1. Sometimes that's important to read. I know I haven't been reading it in the others, but you do always want to get in the habit of reading the directions because sometimes they might say, oh, hey, each dot represents 10. And so then this happened 10, 20, 30, 40 times that people answered 2. So actually get in the habit of please reading the data, the directions of how much your data is being represented. Okay, it says Bailey asked her friend how many times they rode the Ferris wheel at the state fair. The dot plot below represents their answers. Remember, in this instance, it has a value of 1 like we assume. But I just wanted to get you in the habit of that's not always the case. Okay, How many friends did Bailey ask? Well, that's how many people answered. So count your dots. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. How many times was the most often? Well, where's the highest? Right here. That's at 2. And I'm such in the habit of putting students. We were asking Bailey's friends, so technically we should put friends for that one. How many times was the least often? So where's the smallest peak? Right here. 3 times. Why is it the least? Because it never happened. There's no dots there. How many more people rode 0, 1, and 2 than 4? So how many more? So we're going to subtract the number of people that rode 4 times, then all the people that did 0, 1, and 2. So 0, 2 people did that. 1 was 2 people. 2 was 1, 2, 3, 4 people. And you get 2 plus 2 is 4. 4 plus 4 is 8. So you have 8 minus 1, which means 7 people. 4 in the dot plot is called an outlier. It is separated a distance from the other data. Write and solve another question based on the dot plot. So what's something else that you could come up to summarize this? Try and see if you can write a sentence, and then once you have a sentence, unpause the video and check yourself. But I mean, it doesn't have to be the same one as me, just as long as it makes sense. Okay, hopefully you unpaused it and now you're back with us. I would say a question that I could ask would be, how many people never rode the Ferris wheel? And I would say 2 people, because 2 people rode it 0 times. Now, of course, there are many other questions that you could ask based upon this dot plot, so as long as it makes sense and is reasonable. All right, for our dot plot packet, there's just one more page left. So go ahead and turn to page 20. And it says, Coach Taylor recorded swimmers' times at a swim meet. The dot plot below represents their times. How many swimmers did Coach Taylor record their times? Well, how many people answered? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So there's 15 swimmers. Is there an outlier? Is there something that's like way far off than all the others? No, they're all like within 8 seconds. What time was recorded the most? So look at the highest peak. That's right here. 8.32 minutes. What times were recorded the least? So the smallest peak is here and here. So I noticed that they said times because it was a tie. It was 8.28. So 8 minutes and 28 seconds and 8.31. So those were the ones that happened the least amount of times. And of course, always get in the habit of putting your units. How many swimmers took longer than 8 minutes and 30 seconds? So that would be here. It's not included. It didn't say 8:30 and longer. It just said longer than that. So I'm only going to count the 8.31 and on. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So 10 swimmers. How many more swimmers took 8.32 minutes than 8.28 minutes? Okay, so how many more swimmers, when you see the how many more, you know you're going to subtract. Okay, and you have took 8.32 minutes was 1, 2, 3, 4, then 8.28. So go ahead and find that. That's here. 1. So 4 minus 1 is 3 swimmers. Then finally, our last, second to last question says, how many more swimmers' times were 8.34, 8.33, and 8.29 minutes than this one? So the 8.34 happened 3 times. The 8.33 happened twice. The 8.29 happened twice. Then the other amount, so minus how many people happened 8.32. That was 1, 2, 3, 4. So go ahead and add all these together. You have 5 plus 2 is 7, and 7 minus 4 is 3. So again, you have 3 swimmers again for this one. Finally, last question on our last page, which means we're almost done with our review of dot plots. It says, how many swimmers' times were between 8.29 and 8.33? Well, 8.29 is right here, and 8.33 is here. So they said between those times. So in here, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So 7 swimmers. All right, hopefully you guys have gotten a little bit more comfortable regarding how to read and answer questions from a dot plot. Congratulations at mastering yet another standard.